My aesthetic of my jewelry, we very much so have a tagline that I'm trying to say more and more and more, which is just like, dare to be your fucking self. Our jewelry and accessories allow you to really express you and your personality. And I always say my jewelry does contain multitudes. It's always very much so like an offshoot of me, but it always has a bit of punchy edge to it for sure. We don't play it safe, really.
Hi there. This is Her Intentional Reset, a podcast for women in midlife curious about whether the career they chose 20 years ago still fits. Hear from women who've made pivots big and small, discuss the practical realities, the trade-offs, and whether the change was worth it. I'm your host, Molly Whipperford, and I want to thank you for joining. If you're new here, welcome. I'm glad you found us. And in between episodes, come join us on Instagram and Facebook at herintentionalreset.co, that's .co, for guests behind the scenes and what's coming next. Now, let's get into today's conversation. Meet Larissa Loden, founder and creative director, Larissa Loden, located in St. Paul, Minnesota. Larissa Loden is the creative force behind Larissa Loden, a bold jewelry and accessories brand known for helping people dare to be their fucking selves. You heard that correctly. Over the past decade, she has grown her business from a handmade side hustle into a multi-million-dollar brand with a loyal community and national recognition. Beyond business growth, Larissa is passionate about redefining success for entrepreneurs. Through coaching, speaking, and writing, she encourages founders to build businesses that support creativity, joy, and real life instead of burnout. When she's not designing, leading her team, or coaching fellow entrepreneurs, you can find her training for surf camp, traveling with her family, or sharing honest conversations about what it really means to have enough. I'm so glad to have Larissa here. This is Her Intentional Reset. Hey, Larissa, I am so excited to have you on today. So great to meet you.
Yeah, likewise, Molly. Super excited to be here.
So, Larissa, I have been following you and your store since around 2001, 2002. And I don't know what I love more, if it's your bold, unique jewelry or your brand positioning, or if I just really admire you as a business owner and as a really great human being. So I have this huge girl crush stepping into this interview, talking with you. Let's just start from the beginning. Tell us who you were and what you were doing before Larissa Loden and how you ended up in Minnesota. What was that first chapter? What did that look like?
So, correct. You've outed me. I'm not originally from Minnesota. I was born and raised in upstate New York. And I think it seems to me how Minnesota recruits most of its numbers is I followed a boy out here. So I came here because of a relationship. Because it seems like most people that live in the state don't tend to leave this state, or they try and they dabble somewhere else and then they come back, because it is a pretty great state, minus at least the winters for me. But I figured out a way around that for me. So I've tried, y'all, to really embrace the winters. And then by me, embracing the winter means leaving it at a certain amount of times to come back to it to kind of get through. So yeah, I grew up in upstate New York. My family owned a small business. There's a retail gift store. They actually still own it to this day, which is like more than 30 plus years. It's kind of insane. And yeah, so I moved out here and actually didn't want to be an entrepreneur because what I saw growing up was just this constant feast or famine, arguments, just all of kind of the horror war stories of entrepreneurism. So I actually went into art education because my art teachers had a huge impact on me. I loved it. I was an art teacher in Minneapolis for about 8 years and slowly kind of started teaching less and started doing jewelry more and more. It was at a point where I was going to my classroom from like 8 to 1, and then I'd go into my studio from like 1 to 8. And I realized at that time that my assistant principal kind of gave me this like permission and courage to kind of go out and build my business and take it on full time. But I also was, I think, trying to do it all at that time too. honestly out of fear, this idea that I was going to kind of recreate the chaos that I saw growing up, that like feast or famine struggle, that I was like, I'm just going to have to work 7 days a week. And this is the only path and way, because that's what was modeled for me. And that's what I believed was true. But then took a leap of faith out on Larissa Loden, and that was about 10 years ago, and have since learned a ton to get to where I am. I mean, there's been many points for sure where I have just recreated the chaos that I saw growing up. But that's kind of my story arc to kind of how I got here now, if we boiled it down into like 2 minutes.
Yes, I love the conciseness. When did the actual interest in jewelry making start?
So it actually was pretty kismet. My high school art teacher actually left me a necklace that she had made for me on my graduation chair. It was really sweet. And I just remember like looking at it and being so touched, but also feeling like somebody had done me dirty. I was like, wait a minute here. You can make jewelry. Why didn't we make jewelry in any of our classes? You know, because we had done all of this 2D stuff. And then you'll do like the one thing in clay as your 3-dimensional thing. I was like, whoa. Where was jewelry making on the menu options? So then that year when I came out to Minnesota and relocated here, like a good new Minnesotan that is completely clueless, I got a job at the Mall of America at a bead store, because I was like, oh, this is my new calling. This is my new passion. I make jewelry now, which is one of those silly things that creatives do, which is go and get jobs at places where you could spend your entire paycheck. We tell ourselves we can get a discount now. You're also like making $6 an hour. You are going to need to pay for rent and food.
Yes.
But it was cool, actually. So it was at the Mall of America. But what you could do there was you could make and sell consignment, have jewelry there for sale. And my entrepreneurism is just deep within me. So I was like, oh, you mean I can sell something? I was like, I can do this. Like, I was born for this. And so also, I think realizing that I was only making $6 an hour, I was like, well, we're going to figure out some other way to do this. So pretty quickly on, I was making and selling jewelry and started even doing art fairs and everything. But if you had told me that you're like, oh yeah, you own a business now, I was like, no. This is something I do. I wouldn't even call it like a hobby. I just think I was in denial. I was like, I will not call it business. And so that way, if I don't call it by this name, then it will not cause me the pain that I saw growing up.
So I need to ask, that boy that you followed, and then you just mentioned your husband, are they the same?
Are the same. We've been together and known each other more now than when, like, which is really weird to say and very abnormal, I have to say.
Well, that's great. One question that I have about teaching art, and this is from one of my friends that is an art teacher. She painted this portrait of my family. So her question, one of the hardest parts of teaching art is watching kids create while she has to manage instead of creating. So which side of your skill set is stronger? The creative side or the management side?
That's a fun question. When she said that instantly, I'm not going to lie, I think my management is actually a little higher and my creativity is there. But I think when I started out being an art teacher, it was a very intentional choice that I was like, I want to be the jack of all trades and masters of none, because I wanted to be a resource for my students. So that way, if they were like, oh, I'm interested in this, I was like, I know, I got this. I understand this. Yeah. Which has really come on to when I'm running my business and everything. I think it's also, that's just a fun question. So I would definitely say management. And I would have to say though, as I've gotten more reflective on creative process, I would also say that expressing myself through design and jewelry, because it's such a flow state for me when it's happening, I sometimes don't credit it as being creative, which I think is very common for creatives. Is I often find creative people have like the biggest amount of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And myself included. So I'll tend to give my business acumen a whole lot more credit than my creative side.
Okay. It's hard to measure, isn't it? I would think, your creative side.
It is hard to measure, especially because it's so much based in flow. And I think there's just so much out there for business, like strategy and tactics and everything like that. And you can put so much time, energy, and effort and resources into it. So something, when it feels hard or you worked hard for it, then you're like, oh, okay, well, this is what it's worth, versus creativity, where I often find the best and the things I'm most proud of are things that come out of complete flow state. Maybe it's a walk or something, and it just is kind of instant. And because it wasn't such a hard work earned thing, you put less value on it.
Yes.
because our society is so ingrained with this idea of like hard work and effort is work. Just totally constantly trying to unwire in myself. Like it's a constant thing. I
Yeah.
often talk with my coach, the paradox of like, oh, you can make more money and work less. Like, how does that even work? That is the paradox that I'm dealing with.
Yes. And I want to dig into some of the leadership and entrepreneur lessons that you have learned. But first, before you made the full pivot into Larissa Loden, you mentioned that after seeing your family live that entrepreneur lifestyle, you had that fear before making that leap. And then it was your vice principal giving you that permission to go in full time. So what had to be true for you to leave teaching altogether to start Larissa Loden full time?
What had to be true at that moment for me, she said one thing to me that honestly was very a part of the permission slip. She's like, you can always come back to teaching. And that's when I realized, like, oh, if I fail, like my safety net is I come back to something that I was pretty good at. I was like, well, that's not really failing then. I was like, look, I just come back to where I started. When I realized that was the worst case scenario, I also at that point had 2 part-time employees, and what I was bringing in from my jewelry business was more than I was bringing in from teaching. And so I knew that I was like numbers wise, I just was like, this makes more sense. And I do love teaching, but for me, I am very self-motivated. And so teaching is great, but I was like, oh, I can just see the pay scales. Like, and it was like, this is your entire life lined out, no matter how hard you work or anything. And to me, that actually was really demoralizing. And so I knew I was like, well, if I go and bet on myself, then I can very much so let's just see what happens here. And yes, kind of haven't looked back since then.
Did you already have your storefront then?
No, well, yes, no. So I, at that moment, was teaching middle school in Northeast Minneapolis, and probably only 5 minutes away is just all of these really great art studios in Northeast Minneapolis. So I actually had one in the Northrop King building, which is a huge artist studios. I can't remember if that time we had taken over 2 studios, but for sure had one which was 1,000 square feet. So we had like the front half of it is what we called showroom, which was open during all of the big art crawls and then on the weekend, but primarily was like the studio and the workhouse where we'd make and do the jewelry. But it was true startup land mode.
At the beginning, what was your vision for Larissa Loden, and how has that evolved over time?
So I don't think it was very intentional at the beginning. When you read a bunch of books and everything like that, they're always like, what is your why and why you do this? And I don't think that all artist creatives, that's not like my why is that I must create, you know, and I think that is why we have to be very smart that just because something is said doesn't mean that it necessarily applies to you. And it might be true for someone else, but it's not true for you. I believe in that deeply. Like when I think about like somebody's systems or hacks or something like that is like, not all of it is meant for you and you have to make it make sense for you. So at that moment, when I first went in for myself, I think it was just to see like, okay, how much money can we make at this and how much can we grow it? And a lot of it was like leaning into what I knew and what was my skill sets at the time, which I didn't really realize them as skill sets because I was fortunate from growing up in small business that a lot of things were just intuitive to me. So I started doing wholesale at a very early time. Like I was still teaching at the time when we started doing wholesale. And for me, I knew what that was. I knew what terms meant because I grew up in that. And so when the first person asked me, do you do wholesale? I was like, did I do wholesale at that moment? No, but I knew I could figure it out in like less than 48 hours, you know? And so it was really like growing the business. And honestly, I worked a ton then because I didn't understand delegation really at that point. Like I had people helping me, but I was holding all of like the big strategy higher up pieces. And I am a terrible systems operator, but I didn't see it quite at that time. But I was also leaning into my sweet spot, which was doing like pop-up events and one-on-one interactions. We did wholesale and pop-ups. It wasn't until the pandemic that completely like screwed me because that's when, you know, wholesale died because nobody was going to brick and mortar stores and doing like music festivals and all those things all went away. So like while we had an e-commerce business, it was still quite small at that time. And so that's really where I say in my career story arc, we started transitioning to e-com, but I really started doubling down on like business tactics and strategies. And then now in hindsight, I also realized that it was the start of me really starting to hate my business because I started living in what I call like the land of the shoulds, which is everybody's like, you should do this, you should do this, and you should do this. Because what was innate to me at the time, which it was doing wholesale and these types of things, was taken away from me. It just didn't become an option. And so that's really where it became, I think, where I stopped believing in myself. And so I started listening to everybody else. And that's kind of where I think it took a while for me to refine myself again, which has led to really great things. Like all good, hard things usually lead to really great things. And when you look back on perspective, but it was really hard then. And I think it was because I just really was like, for the first time ever, I really didn't quite know what I was doing in the new e-com space and very like figured it out. But that's when we started bringing in like a business like we went on EOS and like, I started hiring more people with skill, but it also was like taking trust falls on, like letting them run with things and stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Let's take a step back. And how would you describe your aesthetic of your jewelry line? And who are your products for?
My aesthetic of my jewelry, we very much so have a tagline that I'm trying to say more and more and more, which is just like, dare to be your fucking self, which is very much like we do have quite a bit of swear words, just also because I've found it still hilarious in 2026 that people are still quite offended by swear words, especially women wearing swear words. I just am like, I'm sorry. Women's suffrage was more than 100 years ago. I just am confused. But it's really, our jewelry and accessories allow you to really express you and your personality and punch a little bit outside that mold. And I always say my jewelry does contain multitudes. It always is within like a certain scope, but I might be designing this for this month in this drop, but I've done a collection for F1 because I'm a big F1 person, or it might be very minimalist and architecture design focused, or I've done some recently on like outdoorsy because I've just really gotten into that. So it's always very much so like an offshoot of me and kind of my customers are just kind of coming along with me in my design and my aesthetic, but it always has like a bit of punchy edge to it for sure. We don't play it safe really.
Yes.
Yeah.
And has that always been your style from the beginning, or has that evolved over time too?
No, it definitely has evolved. I would say very much so in the beginning. And I think it's very true for almost all creatives. You're trying on a lot of different hats and kind of seeing what fits or developing your style. So I would mimic other people or other designs that I saw. And honestly, also, I was like, oh, well, people are buying this gemstone thing, so I'm going to really keep on doing all of this. And it really has been over the past decade for sure, but really like the past 5 years that I've really honed into being like, this is me, and you can take it or you can leave it, and that is totally fine. So,
yes.
But I think you always have to know the rules to break the rules. And I had to learn a lot. Those foundational years were also a lot about understanding jewelry construction and gemstones. And that's allowed, I think, for me to have a lot more play in my later years of being able to be like, oh, well, we're going to do this, or like, how can we play with this,
Yes.
versus like standard diamonds and wedding bands and all of that. I've been able to have a lot more fun.
Yes. Your brand, your name, have you always gone by Larissa Loden, your jewelry?
No, that's so funny. For a very short period of time back when I was at the Mall of America days, it was called Voodoo Designs, and that was a hot second. And then actually for a while, it was called Left Hand Originals because I'm left-handed. But that actually like blew back in my face because this was back when I was doing a ton of art fairs. And some people would stand outside my booth and be like, oh, that's so cool. That's clever. That's jewelry for left-handed people. That makes so much sense. That's so clever. And I was like, no, you have two hands you can put on. That makes zero sense. Don't believe what that random person just said.
You can only wear this ring on your left hand. Sorry.
Oh my God. I was like, who would have ever thought? So when I started doing more fashion events, I just kind of was like, I need to do a rebrand here. Okay. So trying to pick another clever business name, which is honestly, I think one of the most terrible processes of starting a business is you're like, well, oh my God, what am I going to name it? It's honestly one of the worst. I just then decided I was like, I'm just going to call it myself. And for the most part, it's been great.
Yes. Okay. So that makes sense that at the beginning, you are experimenting, figuring out your aesthetic, figuring out your brand, figuring out your name even? And then from the Northrop building, when were you able to scale to your main St. Paul location?
Right before the pandemic, I was starting to think about, like, I'm trying to put on my big girl pants. And I was thinking of kind of a true brick and mortar. And then the pandemic came, and then it was very much like, okay, let's just see if we can make it out of this thing alive for a bit there. And then once things started opening back up from the pandemic, if the pandemic made you feel anything, is that you just need space and space to spread out. Because at that point, still my staff had to be like 6 or 8 feet apart. So what happened then is I started looking at real estate, was very open to leasing, but quickly saw that leasing was just as expensive as buying a building and having a mortgage. And from growing up in a family business that was A, bootstrapped, and B, feast or famine, I've also been always very smart with money and very frugal. Probably sometimes to some of my employees' annoyance, how frugal I can be sometimes. I kind of had saved up enough. And so we actually started looking at buying a building then. That would become the mothership. So it'd hold the offices, fulfillment, the studio, and the store, because I really wanted it all together to smooth, streamline operations. But because we needed that amount of space, I knew that it would probably not be like a 50th in France. It's an extremely high trafficked area. When I first moved to Minnesota, lived in St. Paul, and also just kind of always have a thing for underdogs. And so St. Paul was one of my more preferred locations for our first one. I actually bought it from a family that ran actually a prosthetics company, but it had been in their family for like 80 years. And that was cool to kind of continue on. Then it was going from one small business owner to another. It was pretty rough. It kind of been updated, but it had really great terrazzo floors. And I worked with a friend of mine, and she was like, these floors are worth this entire building. Like, what you're paying for this building is what it would cost to put in these floors right now. And I just kind of was like, okay, cool. So that's what we're going to do. So that was in 2021. And then we opened in 2022.
Wow. Okay. So that's after you got through the scare of COVID, just because we glossed over it very quickly. Back to COVID, back to that e-commerce. For people that maybe don't understand what a big lift that was, can you just at high level explain to us, how were you able to diversify, keep yourself afloat? It was probably very daunting and scary.
Yeah. So when the pandemic first happened, correct, our main streams of revenue and income kind of disappeared overnight. Like 70% of our revenue disappeared, which is huge. And I would say at that time, I had 8 or 10 employees at that time. I also, at that moment, made the decision that I was going to not lay anyone off, which I will say in transparency is kind of a mixed bag, because it put amount of pressure on me. I think it led to a lot of creative thinking, but it also brought on a lot of stress. At that point in time, I was 5 months pregnant, and I can handle quite a fair amount of stress, but I always have this vivid memory of my husband saying to me, he was like, you need to calm down. Like, and he's never, ever, and no female should ever hear those words, but he's like, you are pregnant and everything like that. I was like, my business is failing. And we eventually figured it out. But because I did have that team, how we started doing it was a lot of us started just like doubling down and becoming e-com experts. So like people before that were a little bit more in like office management, all of a sudden had to become email experts, and like social media strategy. And we've always had big community ties. So we started doing a lot more. We started this thing called the Quarantine Craft Club, because people are really trying to do like at-home experiences. So no longer were we making jewelry, but we're sending kits to people to make jewelry, which is hilarious, because it actually took us more time to make the kits than it did to make the actual jewelry. And I just was like, this is kind of funny and silly at the same time, that it takes us more effort to make the kit than it does to actually make the actual jewelry. But we did it, and we kind of formed this community around it. There is something about stress. Sometimes when you're pigeoned into something, it can actually breed moments of great creativity. It's just that you can't stay there. Stress reactions aren't a long haul play at all. So we started doing the quarantine craft kits, and at the time it was banana pants. So what I would do is I would then go into the Northrop King building by myself, and I'd prep these kits for then my team to then either make then those kits that we would then send out to people, and or like make the jewelry. And I just drive around all of the Twin Cities dropping off kits to all of my makers. So it was just like everybody had new job roles. Like whenever I'm hiring somebody now, and I mean, even still to that day, I didn't quite know it, but I'm always looking for like, how adaptable are you?
Mm-hmm.
Because in small business, you have to be very adaptable. And so I'm always looking for people that have a high degree of adaptability and also are very okay with saying like, this day you were doing this, but tomorrow you might be doing this. And if you can't adapt, like you are probably great and fine somewhere else. But
Yeah.
if for a small business, like you just need that level of degree of that. So
Mm-hmm.
started doing that. And then eventually things just kind of like every month things would change. Eventually stores started figuring out how you could pull up and people would run down orders. And then eventually some sales would start returning because it was what was called like the Zoom era of earrings because everybody was on Zoom and like people were always checking out everybody's earrings. It just is like, I feel like everybody lived like 10 lifetimes in that year alone. And just like you did though, you had to just be like, this month we were doing this and this month we were doing this and be able to launch something quick. Like if you were smart and could launch a product quickly and be a highly adaptable, you survived a pandemic. And that's really where we did. And we did learn how to become really great e-commerce experts. And it was always funny because before the pandemic, we always were like, how do we grow e-com? And the pandemic made us do that. So where wholesale used to be our bread and butter, it actually became e-commerce that became our bread and butter after the pandemic. And that's kind of where we have stayed since then.
Okay. Okay.
Weird turn of fates.
So at any point, were you ever convinced that it was time to go back to the stability of teaching?
No, it was very in my blood now. And I think being able to have an idea and then build it, I think it's pretty common once I've seen an entrepreneur build one thing, not always, but you kind of know that you can then build something else. And so for some reason, this went away, or I think for me, it's like I'm building kind of multiple things at the same time, which can happen as well. So
yes.
I have it, but I feel deeply for teachers, especially art teachers. And like we've given away to organizations that support education. And I'm always just trying to think about how more and more I can like deepen the ties with teachers and art educators, to be honest, through my company as like a funnel for that.
Yes. On that note, you have donated over $150,000 in proceeds to organizations that you care about. It's stated publicly on your website that you guys give back 5% of proceeds. How are you deciding which organizations to work with or donate?
Oh, it's a little bit based off of need and time. And then it's pretty closely tied to like my team as well. So my team, like based off of what's going on with my team or organizations that are close to them. So like at the beginning of the year with what was happening in Minnesota, we very much so gave back to Immigrant Rapid Response Fund through the Women's Foundation and then also the ACLU and then also the Salt Cure Fund for restaurants. So that's need based, you know, and being timely. And that's kind of our funnel. And other things like Cookie Cart has been a partner we've given back to a lot. We've also done stuff with, like for me, one that's close to me is the Ronald McDonald House, because my family used that growing up. So it's really kind of based off of values, I would say at the end of the day. It's all just really tied to personal values and team values as well. We do try to do a very deep job of vetting. And so we always like go to Charity Navigator and actually like read up on reports. We're actually like, because we work really hard to raise that money to then be able to donate. And so we want to make sure that it has the most amount of impact as well.
Yeah.
We're always looking into that. It's very important to me that we give back, but also I admire brands that do it as well. I'd like to think that I do it for things that all humans should view as like, these are just good things to give back to. I'm really trying not to be like, you should believe. I always say I like try to live in the sea of grays and everything, but there are certain things where I'm like, these are just good human things. But yeah, I very much so think that I admire businesses that take a part of it, especially once you're profitable.
Yeah.
I do believe that there is enough pie to go around to everybody. And so I do try to very intentionally always make sure that my team and my staff that we're giving them very much so increasing their wages and giving them bonuses, but then also giving it to nonprofits as well. So it's a lot of intentional by design.
Yes. I love how you're incorporating your personal values into the business that you're building as well. I loved your comment about the sea of gray. And that brings me to talking about your design and business collaborations that you're choosing. And why I bring up the sea of gray is I loved how you rolled out the collaboration with Heidi Clemens. And the messaging that not everything is black and white. We can hold these contradictions of sweet and feral or soft and a little wild. How do you decide who you're collaborating with and what is the goal of the collaborations?
It's they do have to be values aligned. I will say that. Like, that is something I don't just collaborate with anybody. I would say they kind of can hit a couple of different buckets. Some can be quite strategic. And then sometimes it's just because I want to and because it feels good. And I give myself permission to kind of live within that. So our most recent collaboration with Heidi Clemens, social media, welcome to Heidi. She was just somebody that we gifted to early on because we just truly loved her content. It's very unapologetic, but also permission to be yourself, which is right where we fit in as a brand. And it just actually evolved into a very nice, like, mutual relationship where we just really like each other. And that's the best kind of collaboration, when things can evolve naturally.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for those kinds of win-win relationships. I'm always trying to kind of get to that spot of win-win thinking, like, how can we all like win here? And then other times it's very much so Formula One or around like books. It's just because I love sharing and bringing up more niche audiences. Like, Formula One is niche and it's not niche. Like, among millennial females, I would say I'm very few, I would say. But also, like, we've done stuff with like smut authors and everything like that. And I just think that's very fun. I want people to have life filled with joy, which fits in with Heidi. And I think that's where it is like, if it's something that feels very joyful and allows people to show like the multitudes that they contain, that's where I'm going to kind of go in and pick those collaborations. But it does have to be values aligned. And so if we're collaborating with someone, a brand or a person, and it feels like they don't live in gray or they take it a certain way, I will typically say, like, this isn't the collaboration for us at that moment. Because I want my brand and who we work with also to feel like an entry point for people. And that's pretty important to me.
Let's talk about your leadership style.
Yeah, my leadership style has very much evolved over time. I think it's like through the school of hard knocks. I don't honestly believe that you can like go to school and learn how to be a leader. I think it's honestly through trial and error a little bit. And for me, that is my lived experience. But at first, I think it was very much so I didn't trust. And so I over-engineered things. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of people. I think that's how people get into micromanaging, is that there's some part of like trust and fear that's broken. And so we over-engineer things. And I've actually come very much so now to become a person that I'll give my team like a pretty wide scope, but I'm very communicative with them. But a lot of that's come through, I ended up getting a coach and I've now become like coach certified. Through this program called iPEC, which is on energy awareness, and I coach other entrepreneurs in addition to running Larissa Loden. And I use a lot of those skills that I learned through coaching, honestly, being a leader now, because like nobody wants to suck at their job, like it's just facts. Sucking at anything doesn't feel good. And a lot of times it's either a misalignment on scope or it's just not clear communication. I've also realized as I've grown my business now, like truly nothing is an emergency. There just isn't, except for maybe the building truly burning down. Before, I would totally be like looking at data, checking my email all the time and everything. And now I don't have Shopify on my phone. I don't have Slack on my phone. I'm always kind of actually thinking I should remove email from my phone. Social media is on a timer for 30 minutes. And that's actually led me to be a lot better leader. The more white noise I give myself, the better leader I am, because I give people space. Because people are smart, like make their own decisions. And if they make a mistake, there's really no mistake. We can't take it as a lesson learned and rebound from. So yeah, I would say it's, once again, it's like just values-based leadership, like my personal values, but it is also in just a lot of intentionality and curiosity that's there around it.
I've read in your Substack talking about the risk of trying to grow at all costs. And the risk of that is the burnout. And is it worth putting all your energy into just growing and scaling your business with the goal of selling it eventually? And what's that costing you? So how have you learned not to let that run your nervous system?
Yeah, a lot from coaching. My current coach, who's like stuck with me for the rest of her life, I don't know if she knows that or not. early on, she asked me a question. I think that is like honestly one of the best questions for anybody to ask themselves. But she was like, is your business building you or draining you? And I just think that's such a profound question. And I think anybody should just honestly ask themselves about that in their life. Like, is your life building you or is your life draining you? Because at the end of the day, you are the driver of your life. And I had realized that I built a business that was structured in a way that we were doing things in a way that honestly it was just draining me. Like I was just like checking boxes and I wasn't building. So we restructured it and did in a very intentional way. We do certain things like called Super Meeting Tuesday, which is like all meetings are on a Tuesday. So that way we could do a lot of deep work the rest of the week. I like leave Fridays to be very creative. And so really kind of lessening a lot of the obligations that like the world said that we should. It was interesting. I think we say like, oh, well, I have to have this meeting or whatever. And I'm always like, do we have to have this meeting? Like, you know, really? Or what if we took this meeting and combined it? Maybe it's not the marketing meeting, you know? And so a lot of very intentional things to kind of get to where now I feel like my business is building me and it's allowing me that space to be my best creative self. And by also letting go of scaling. Entrepreneurs were told this whole idea of grow it and sell it. That's what success means. And I think it's like you really have to define what success means to you. And I think once I really started asking those types of questions, like what does success mean to me? That I then realized success to me means I actually enjoy running my business if it works for me in a certain way. And so I'm able to go like all of my kids' events. I'm able to spend time with friends. I'm able to take the trips that I want. I'm able to build the things that I want. And so like when I started redefining it like that, I was like, oh, this is actually quite fun. And I really enjoy doing it. And now I actually think it's led to a much better product and much better collabs. And people that know me deeply, that know that transition, they're like, I can tell like, you're just like, your brand is more fun. Like you're having way more fun with this. And that I think is A, validation, but B, I truly think where you are at is where like everybody can sense and feel it. And so when we stop trying to grow from force, like brute force, I right-sized the business where I was like, all right, this is what I reasonably think the business can make. And this is reasonably what our operating expenses are going to be. And it leaves this much for like profit, which is just my nest egg. Like I always call it like the oh shit fund. I was like, this is good. This is all I need. You know, and then it's hilarious. And then the business actually just grows organically then, which is the best type. Like that's what you want.
Yes.
Pretty good.
How are you finding time to run a business, be a coach, and then you also have this amazing Substack that you're writing? So how are you making all of this work?
Yeah, the hats that I hold at my company is I am the CEO of the company, but I have a really fabulous operator. Like she's a killer, but she also has an amazing skill set that I don't. You should definitely hire for what your gaps are. So I'm the CEO and then I lead all of the marketing at Larissa Loden because the brand is so closely tied to me. I've tried to give off marketing many times and it's failed because the brand is so me. So it actually reduced a lot of meetings and things by actually just taking it back on and leading that creative vision and then do all product design for my company. Otherwise, all other functions of that of Larissa Loden Inc. are handled by other people. Really a wonderful, great people. And I think that's really allowed for me then to have that freedom because that keeps me in, we've heard these terms before, like zone of genius, but that is kind of where my zone of genius is. And so then that does actually leave me a fair amount of time. Coaching is something that my team knows is really important to me. And it actually allows me to be a better leader. And it's really funny, like coaching other people brings me much joy, but it's also really funny coaching other people. You coach yourself in the same time because like they'll be going through something and then you'll do this really fun, weird dot to dot. You'll be like, huh. Oh yeah, that applies to me too there. So it's just this really great thing. And through my coaching program, it's also like I give back to it. It's one of these things where my energy is giving back to those people and it really fills my cup up. So it's just a non-negotiable for me. And so how do I fit all of these things in is just by very intentional design on how my days work and function. I almost never have meetings before noon. That is my deep focus time. So the first 4 hours of the day are extremely deep focus on work, except for Super Meeting Tuesday, which is all meetings. And then the afternoons are typically a little bit more like I actually go work out with like a personal trainer in the afternoons. I'll take coaching sessions then because I found that that is when it is better. So it's always about a lot of intentionality about like where does the best work happen. Like creative work for me typically goes towards the end of the week. So like writing the Substack and designing the collections, because I find like it's like the emails and the noise kind of get handled between Monday and Wednesday. And so that way then I feel a little lessened and I'm able to be creative during those later days in the week. And then, and pretty hard boundaries unless it's like a big event that we're hosting. I don't work on the weekends, pretty firm on that.
What type of entrepreneurs do you work with, or what type of coaching clients do you work with?
I'll really work with anybody, but it pretty much always ends up being people come to me because they're entrepreneurs in what I usually call stage 1, stage 2. So stage 1 is you're wearing all the hats, and stage 2 is you're starting to hand off the hats. Okay. I'm what I call in stage 3. I've handed off most of the hats, like a little sometimes stage 2. And so I pretty much work with people that are stage 1 or stage 2. I can work with people that are stage 2 or 3, but I haven't worked too hard at like recruiting client. Like I do it very intentionally, want to have a fair amount of flexibility with my schedule. So I put a pretty hard cap on the amount of clients that I will see. And that's where I'm putting way more effort into my Substack and then public speaking, because I know I can reach more people then, and hopefully they'll get something out of my writings and everything. And honestly, I hope to in time, it's on I think it's a Japanese word. It's like another entrepreneur I love dearly. His name is Jesse Itzler. He's Sarah Blakely's husband. She founded Spanx.
Yeah. Yep.
He's very fun, but he calls it's Mashogi, which is just these like giant, radical, like huge ideas. So I would like to write a book at some time. So that's one of my Mashogis. So
Okay. Love it. And knowing you, I know you're going to do it. So I can't wait to read it. I saw in one of your social posts a peek of the book, The Artist's Way. And with this podcast, we have started this Her Intentional Reset Experience, The Artist's Way Creative Cluster, working through the book. So I have to ask you, how did you discover The Artist's Way, and how do you use this book?
Oh man, I love The Artist's Way. So I actually discovered it through my coach. So I started pretty much in like January of 2025 when I was still very much intentionally resetting things. I started doing it, and it was like the book was reading my goddamn mind. It just really was the best thing. And like journaling is something I am deeply obsessed with now. And so finding Julia Cameron in her writings, and I think that's where I think it's really interesting, is that I truly believe everybody is creative. And I'm just really bummed that society leads people to believe that they're not creative. I just think creativity shows in different ways. And I think Julia's book speaks beautifully to that aspect. And it just also, I mean, this book is written like, I think it's like 40 years ago now. Like it all is so applicable, but it also is such validation and confirmation that our brains are our best and worst enemies. And she just helps you like lessen the load and remind yourself of these things. And I love it. So I actually am right now working through her other book, which is Walking in This World, which is all of her on walking. So I'm a very big believer in journaling, and then also just taking walks, like just like quiet walks, like big hiker and all of that. Some people are always like, I was like, if you can commit to the practice of The Artist's Way, it's truly life-changing, like life-changing.
I know between week 8 and 10, they say there's a wobble, or that's where sometimes people will give it up. Any best practices, tips, suggestions to when our group gets to that point?
Honestly, I will say I gave myself permission that sometimes some of the weeks would take a little bit more or less. But what I actually did was like kind of on the idea of like Creative Fridays is how I actually started structuring it. Morning pages are like, ever since I started doing morning pages, I will never let them go again. I was also like working through and untangling, I think, a lot at that moment. And so for me, it's like just this giant mental clearing. But what I would do is like on those Fridays or on those weekends, and my husband is really great, I would just take a lot of time and like kind of slowly move through them. Because some of those weeks are a little bit bigger and a little meatier. And so I just kind of gave myself that like free flowing space. And I also, though, did it in a space that felt really right to me. Is we live by water, which is really important to me. So I went and found a space that felt very right and very grounding for me. And I think that's really important. Like if just anything you're ever doing feels by force, maybe that's not the best place. So I think being intentional about where you're doing it is also very important. Like what is your practice around it? Like, you know, like I have a really great cup of coffee with me when I'm doing it, and it just kind of sets up my day. I know really great ways. I just came back from seeing my family and I didn't have my morning routine. You know, the days were fine. They were my great best. So having that, it's like, life-changing.
Yes. Yes. Thanks for sharing that. So you have provided us so much insight, Larissa. And I think I just keep coming back to like, wow, your comment of you are in your driver's seat of the life that you want to create, and seeing how you are able to, again, just back to your values, what you value personally, how you're able to incorporate this into the business side of things, how you are able to build this business that is doing very well, that also gives you this freedom to continue to explore other avenues of your creativity. It's pretty amazing, what you are building and how you have been in your driver's seat the whole time. What are the strengths that helped you get here?
Honestly, I think a lot of the strengths are the strengths that I got from going through the program iPEC and my coaching training that I got there. We talk a lot about energy awareness, and there's these 7 levels of energy. It allows me to understand like what kind of energy people are showing up with to certain things, and also myself. And then also very much so we get into certain energies because it's like by default, like stress or whatever, but I very consciously know that I get to choose how long I stay in certain energy levels and then move past that. Having that and just the sentence stems of knowing like the stories that I'm telling myself or whatever, it just has kind of changed my life. I mean, I will even say like it meant a lot to me. Like my husband even said to me, he was like, I think you going and getting coach training was like the best thing that ever happened for our marriage, because he started noticing how I was navigating life so differently. Because half of life is communication. I mean, it's not half of life. It's 90% of life is communication. And so I think learning certain sentence stems or ways to ask questions makes it like disarm and just lead with curiosity. Even starting off a question, like saying to somebody, the story that I'm telling myself about this interaction was that you were super upset with me and, like you hate what I did or something like that. And the way of even framing it like that, it's taking that pressure off of somebody, but it's sharing what's very true for you at that moment. And that way it creates a starting point for you to have that discussion then. And learning that kind of small things in business and personal, like everything is just such a game changer.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I love that. How did you find your coach?
My coach, honestly, she actually was the person that led my training. When I met her, I was like, whatever you're selling, I will buy. There's just people we meet in life and then we're like, I must, whatever it takes. But my first coach was actually a bunch of my friends got a business coach and I was like, yeah, sure. Fuck it. Like, why not? He was great. And then honestly, it's like asking people around, more people than not, I feel like have coaches now, but honestly, sometimes it is like going on LinkedIn, like doing a little bit of work. But what I always love about coaching that it is a little different. I think coaching therapy, anything to kind of do with working through our mental models is really great. But it's like, what I always love about coaching is it's like examining your present state where you are now and like, what do you want to do moving forward? Whereas therapy can be a little bit more of like what happened in the past to inform the present, whereas coaching is a bit more about present and then what do we want. And for me, that worked way better because I'm like, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Like, it's that idea of building and creating.
Love it. All right. Because we are not all career women, we are switching gears to our rapid round, just lighthearted, fun questions.
I love it.
In terms of family, kids, do you have a go-to entertaining meal or recipe?
Yeah. Charcuterie is the best ever. And I don't get super crazy with it, but charcuterie boards are the best, man. Just 10 out of 10. Yeah. Delicious. And plus then I feel like I get to buy a couple fun bougie things. I go to like those certain markets. I'm like, look at these olives. I just eat it up.
Speaking of bougie, another one of your videos that you posted on Larissa Loden, I heard how you made puppy chow. Can you share how you make puppy chow?
Oh, yeah. So I do Chex Mix with Nutella and then nuts, and then you do the powdered sugar over it. You mix the Nutella and the peanut butter together, and then you shake it in there.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to have to try that because my son loves puppy chow.
Fucking crack. Yeah.
Do you have 2 kids?
Yeah. Yes, I have 2 kids. They're 5 and 7, almost 6 and 8.
Do you have one mom hack or life hack?
Yeah, I would say it's more of a life hack. I think people always look and they're like, oh my gosh, she's traveling all the time, which is true. I do travel all the time, but it's off of credit card points. So I'm always using credit card points. And then I couple that with actually tracking airfare deals. And that's how my family travels all the time. And I think that's where my kids love travel now. It was really great. My son was actually like, I don't need as much toys if that helps us save up for travel. And I was like, that is awesome that he sees how much travel is. I don't actually get super set on like, oh, we have to go to this location or location. I let the deals say where we're going to go. Like our first time to Costa Rica, it's because I found an airfare deal on Delta where it was Minneapolis to Costa Rica. And it was like $300. So I tend to wait for deals to happen. I'm going to Hong Kong in September and Delta had an airfare deal for, it was like 30,000 miles. I was like, that is insane. Like insanity. Yes. Which does go with like the flexibility of me designing a life that is flexible.
On that note of travel, tell us, where are you going for surf camp?
It will be back to Costa Rica.
Okay.
I like Costa Rica. You don't change time zones and there is a direct flight from Minneapolis, which is pretty baller, but also the water is warm. So unlike California where you'd have to wear a wetsuit, you don't need to in Costa Rica. And they have some of the nicest training waves for anywhere. So it's not going to eat me alive.
Yeah, very cool. In terms of inspiration, do you have a favorite book?
I mean, honestly, The Artist Way is one of my probably favorite books. I would say there's also a guy I really love reading. His name is Derek Severs. And he just has these really short books. He's just a fun guy. He started a company a long time ago called CD Baby, which was also very like contrarian, but he has a book called Hell Yeah or No. And then he has another book called like What's Worth Doing. And I think that those are really great life books and they're very easy. You could easily read it in a sitting, to be quite honest. He was like, I don't feel like pontificating and making things like 8,000 pages long. And I was like, I appreciate that. So yes.
Do you have a mantra or motto that you live by?
One that I tell people pretty much all the time that I do kind of live by is you're already at a no, so you might as well ask. Because if that person says no, you're back to where you started. So you didn't really lose anything. But more times people say yes. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Final question. Do you have one non-negotiable for your well-being?
Yeah, it's the journaling, to be quite honest. That is the thing that I wake up in the morning on. And it's pretty rare that it doesn't happen. I would say I've had like a 98% success rate of journaling every single morning. It's the way that it clears out the cobwebs of my brain and just helps me process and function as a human is huge.
Yes. Thanks for sharing that. And just thank you for all your time, for all your insight. Larissa, what strikes me the most isn't just how far you've grown, but that you've done it all on your own terms with so much intentionality, with your values to your core, leading and carving out the life that you want. If listeners want to shop Larissa Loden or follow along with you or follow along with what you're building, where do they find you?
They can find us on the web on larissaloden.com. It's the same Instagram handle, so Larissa Loden. But if they want to follow me, like the founder, a bit more, I have a separate social handle, which is It's Me, Larissa Loden, or my favorite thing is my Substack, and that's called The Unfucking. But you can also search Larissa Loden as well.
Great. We'll link that all in our show notes. Thanks again, Larissa.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, subscribe on your preferred streaming platform so you never miss another conversation, and share this with one woman who needs to hear it. Every subscribe and every share helps the algorithm get the show in front of more women asking the same questions that we are. That's how we grow this community together. And remember to explore on your own terms, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And to our loyal listeners, these are my after show reflections. I told Larissa at the top of this conversation that I didn't know what I loved more, her jewelry, her brand, the way her business gives back, or just who she is as a human. And sitting here now, I think I have my answer. They're not different things. Everything she's built, the jewelry, the coaching, the collaborations, the 5% back, the way she structures her weeks, it's all one thing. It's her values walking around in the world. The line I keep coming back to is her comment that you are the driver of your life. That one hit me when I needed it most. We're midway through the year, and I've been asking myself, Am I any closer to figuring out what's next, or am I still swirling? And I had the tiniest thought the other day of, it would just be so much easier to get a corporate job. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying I had the thought. And that's exactly why her other question is staying in the forefront of my mind. Is your business building you or draining you? Is your life building you or draining you? So that's what I'm working through right now in my morning pages through The Artist's Way. If today's episode got you thinking, I'd love to keep this conversation going. Sign up for my email list at herintentionalreset.com. You'll get the latest updates on episodes, additional resources from our guests. Sign up at herintentionalreset.com. I'll see you there, and I'll see you next episode.